Hi, hello. My name is Sansire, or Sansi for short. I'll be your guide for today's session. We'll be talking about human first customer assessments, or HCAs. I live here in Amherst, New Hampshire. That's Amherst behind me. We're about an hour north of Boston, Massachusetts. I'm co-founder of a company called Quala. We'll talk a little bit more about Quala in a second. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. So let's dive right in. The agenda for today is going to be focused on what's happening right now that makes qualitative data from customer success managers so compelling. Then we're going to share a little bit more about why HCAs are important, why we care about the customer narrative, and how these these assessments can help give us an edge. We'll talk a little bit about how to do them easy and simple and the best way, which is really over time. And we'll give you all of the quick and simple tools and resources that you need in order to get you started on your own program. Well, first, here's a little bit about me. This is my husband, Kevin, on the left, and we have our two pups, Benny and June. It's their first birthday party. Yes, we made them cupcakes. For all you Gen Xers out there, you know the reference to the 90s romantic comedy that has Johnny Depp in it by the same name, Benny and June. I spend my time with family, and I really like to build things, whether they're things on the internet like Koala or things in the physical world. I'm also, I mentioned earlier, the co-founder of Quala, but prior to Quala, I co-founded a marketing technology company called Promobox. And Promobox was also another Boston-based company. I built and scaled the customer success services and support teams for about 10 years while I was there. And the frustrations and opportunities I experienced while I was at Promobox really directly contributed to the work we're doing here at Quala. So what do we do here at Quala? Quala, it is a play on qualitative. We are a human-first customer success platform, and we measure only the most important relationship-driven and product-driven value in order to deliver a more crisp and clear view of customer health. The topic at hand that we are chatting about today, the idea of human-first customer assessments, is really near and dear and to the core at what we do here at Quala. I mentioned here, this is how the technology manifests, but what we're really up to is helping customer success teams understand and strengthen their connections with customers. We're all motivated as human beings by the relationships that we're creating and maintaining, and we love the opportunity to be able to continue to strengthen them and to understand them from a customer success to customer standpoint. It's really difficult to do, but it's very important. So let's chat a little bit about the major important shifts that we are experiencing. And that really is that the voice of the CSM, we feel like, is being overlooked in all of the data sets that we have today to understand customer health. Thousands of customer success teams are investing in technology that does not embrace the customer success manager's expert point of view, or not in a way that's really easily leverageable and scalable for leaders trying to understand the signal through the noise. In the midst of our usage data tracking and feedback surveys, we are still missing a critical piece of the puzzle. We have complex data dashboards that force CS teams to go data splunking to find relevant information that can power customer interactions and help them better connect with those customers. But we are really over-indexing on usage data. Now, usage data, it's incredibly important. It is a big piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole picture. Similarly, surveys like NPS or CES or CSAT, they mostly go, in a lot of cases, unanswered, or at least unanswered by our main champions or buyers. And at best, they overlook important qualitative insights. And at worst, they unfortunately mute the voice of the CSM. CSMs, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. If you're here today, so you understand the importance of their voice. CSMs are one of the most powerful and intelligent resources that we have at our companies on our teams. They're interacting with our customers from a day-to-day perspective, day in, again, and day out. They draw from a really, really deep well of knowledge, but that knowledge is getting lost in the noise and it goes widely untapped from a leadership perspective. As you can see here on the right, we basically have a wall where execs find it really difficult to understand the subjective narrative or component of what CSMs are experiencing from a ground level. And CSMs don't necessarily have the language to talk about what's happening in a way that's easily digested by execs and the greater team. So, how does this really manifest, or how did it manifest for me and my own unique experience? I know there are a lot of us out there that have had similar experiences where we found that usage data is only part of the story. I mentioned my previous company, Promobox. Our usage data told us that we had great platform engagement. We thought that translated into amazing, healthy customers. But customers were still leaving, and the data really didn't illuminate why or what we could do about it. We found that customers were using our platform up until the very day that they churned. They were launching campaigns up until the very day that they churned. And usage told us that things were good. NPS from the day-to-day user told us that they rated us a 10. They loved us. But what the data didn't tell us was that the champion was actually frustrated by our pricing and our lack of innovation, that they hadn't felt like we had grown with them over time. A quick chat with the CSM would shed some light to the story, but unfortunately, in many cases, this happened either too late or the relevant information just didn't bubble up in a way that was useful or actionable. Now, what we didn't capture in many of these cases prior to renewal was also that our champion was engaging less and less with us. And mysteriously, they were unable to serve as a reference due to their busy schedules when maybe previously they were open to or maybe had done in the past. I needed to understand as a leader what was going on, but I had no way of capturing this type of data across all of my CSMs, across all of our customers, month over month in a way that was leverageable and scalable. So let's talk about the voice of the CSM and how this data is getting lost. We are missing critical human first pieces of information and insights that can complete the customer retention and growth data metric set, right? Well, in a lot of cases today, we are following into some traps and pitfalls to try to get at this data. The first is that we implement NPS. NPS is a great score, but that being said, it's single-threaded, and a lot of times our questions go unanswered or unanswered again by the buyer or champion. Then we try maybe at some point to implement some sort of field yes or no question where we ask the CSMs to validate the health score, but we don't have any context for why that was validated, why it was valid or invalid. It's a binary field. Maybe we ask them to add some single point in time notes into our CRM, but again, we don't do business or we don't build relationships with logos. We build relationships with people, and a lot of these notes are associated with the logo. I'm not saying these tactics are bad, they're really incomplete, and I'm sure many of you would agree given your experience. So how do we draw from the deep well of knowledge that CSMs are drawing from every day? How do we help them assess true health in a reliable, scalable way? And how does that inform our metrics? So if you're thinking, yes, this sounds like me, you're definitely not alone. Yes, we need the qualitative. Actually, 62% of execs have low confidence in their customer insights, and this is due to their reported inability to fully embrace the subjective. So our insights power our understanding of the world. Of course, our renewal forecasting, they're pretty important. They power our playbooks. They power how we prioritize our day. So how do we get confidence in this data? How do we involve the subjective? Of course, that's the reason why we're here, and I have a lot of thoughts on this. So The way forward is to amplify the voice of the customer success manager. It's to allow them to track and share the qualitative viewpoints and then transform those viewpoints into quantitative data sets that we can use to create better teams, to create better customer connections, and to create better organizations. Some of the things that we're going to encounter as we try to do this or have encountered is that we need to capture the narrative. That's a whole piece in itself. We need to turn that story into data. Okay, how do we do that? Then we need to normalize the data. We have a bunch of different CSMs with glass half full, glass half empty. And then we need to rinse and repeat. So given the fact that those are things with as leaders we're charged with accomplishing, how do we do that? Okay, so introducing the Human First Customer Assessment, or the HCA, which I've mentioned previously. Here you are looking at an example HCA. I'm going to walk us through how this data is completed or captured in Quala. And I'm also going to provide you all with a Google spreadsheet that you can use to start to flex your HCA muscle, start to collect this data, and understand how to create trends from it over time. So just so you can see here, it's a series of questions that we have. There's a contextual rating that we provide, and also there's some reactions and collaboration that can happen when these assessments are posted. And again, they are posted on at an ongoing cadence, because again, this is not point in time data. This is data that we need to collect month in and month out, or, at again, the certain cadence that makes sense for you and your business, depending on how often you're chatting with your customers. I want to just pause here and address something really quickly that we get questions about, and that's how the CSM scale or the ratio of CSMs to customers affects the ability to perform the HCA, or to, I should say, accept the HCA into the health score. So whether your team is, on a ratio of 1 to 10 or 1 to 20 or 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 15,000, you can implement HCA. Now, the way you do it might be slightly different depending on the ratio, but the importance is that these conversations are happening. They're happening at different times and at different intervals, depending on the customer set that the CSM is managing, but they are happening. And likely your team has a strategic focus as well on some core customers, and this information needs to be trapped to understand health. There's a ton of information that CSMs are learning from their calls. We need to put it somewhere. So let me get out of this presentation for just a moment, and I'm going to jump into Quala. And I am going to show you how these assessments are created and added. So right now I'm looking at an example demo customer called Crayon, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the assessment icon. And now I can see a series of 5 questions. So these 5 questions I'm going to run through is if I was a CSM. Let's role play a bit. Let's say I just jumped off of an enterprise business review or an EBR with the customer, and our main champion or buyer, Brendan, was on the call. And it was an hour-long call. I have a ton of great information, and I want to capture some of that qualitative information somewhere so we can turn it into a quantitative data set. So the first question I am going to go through is, how critical are we to their success as a business? These questions are customizable. You should customize them, as well as the ratings. So I had a fantastic call. Brendan and a few members of his team joined, core members of the team, and they expressed how much Quala was saving them time and how much more reliable their health scores are now that they have implemented the platform, and that they are having better interactions with their customers and being able to provide better retention, forecasting data sets to their execs or to the exec team. So I would say that they're not a 5, not that they couldn't do business without us at this point, but they're definitely 4 and nice to have. They prefer to have us because they're seeing a lot of gains. So I'm going to go ahead and click 4. how engaged is our buyer on calls, or maybe this says in our interactions. So in this case, super active. They are constantly asking questions and offering advice. This is Brendan 110%. On our call, he spoke way more than I did, which I love. He was championing the wins that his team was experiencing and what they love about the platform. He was sharing about all the things, additional things that they want to do with the technology. And it was just wonderful. And he was getting the team all excited. I'm not going to choose 4 because it's not that he's pretty active. He wasn't just asking a few questions. His tone wasn't just positive. It was ecstatic. So I'm going to go ahead and choose 5. Now, how likely is Crayon to renew? Well, they're up for renewal in 90 days. So Brendan provided us with a verbal yes. He said they were going through budget approvals and that they definitely wanted to continue and had already made plans in Q1 to continue the work. So I'm going to say not 5. We don't have a signed agreement, but we do have a verbal yes from the buyer. So I'm going to say 4. Now, the next one is the customer hitting their goals? I'm just taking you through how I'm thinking about these questions. Normally, it's going to take a few seconds for a CSM that's done this a handful of times. It's taking me a little bit more because we're explaining why. Is the customer hitting their goals? So they're on track to hitting their goals, and they have hit a few goals at the cadence or at the time that they wanted to. So if they had missed on a few goals, or if they were behind them, then I'm behind on them, then I might click 3. If they were missing several, I'd click 1. If they had not hit any goals, I would have clicked 2 if they're missing several. I would click 1 if they hadn't hit a single goal. So I'm going to say 4, they are on track. So this is a pretty good customer from a qualitative perspective. Would they be willing to serve as a reference? I'd already asked this to get a sense. We have a new customer that's also in the same technology space as Crayon. And so Brendan is more than happy to serve as a reference and has actually already done so in the past. So I'm going to say a number 5. Now, if Brendan right now was willing to serve as a reference, and then a few months later had actually said that he was no longer willing to serve as a reference, or had offered to, but then never actually made the connection or followed up, then I would adjust my rating the next time accordingly. So then I can see over time how this data is changing again, which is why over time is the key and not a single point in time, and especially not just before renewal. So highly likely. Great. When I save this information in Quala, there's a narrative component to it that goes in our feed, and there is a quantitative component of it that goes into our metrics dashboard, and then it actually influences the health score, which is a combination of quantitative usage metrics and also qualitative voice of the customer success manager. So that's the way this manifests in Quala. Now, I will be providing you guys with a spreadsheet so you can do this in a much more simple way. And it has example questions, ratings, and scores, so you can at least get started. Let me go back to the presentation and walk you through. So now that you've seen the HCA and you know what it is and essentially how it works, we're going to talk about what are the 6 most important things to consider when you are rolling out a program, rolling out the HCA program and including it in the rest of your quantitative or qualitative metrics. So think of the assessments as customized interactive report cards for your customers that are qualitative leading indicators of success. So your customer success managers should not feel like the HCA is a measurement of their wealth as a human, or their worth as a human being, or as their value to your organization. It is a teacher to student assessment. It is the CSM to customer assessment of where they are in this moment. And then as you go through time, where they are at each point in time. So questions need to be leading indicators of success. This will be different depending on your business. What might be leading to me might be lagging to others. So some examples, and we have a ton of about 15 example questions that you can choose from. Happy to provide those. Will the customer refer us to other customers? We saw this in our example assessment. How engaged is our buyer in our executive business reviews? We also answered that question. Are they on track to hitting their goals? That was an important one. Well, so this one shows us how we are doing qualitatively from the CSM perspective, but it also is an indicator of future health for the customer. If they are not referring other customers to us right now, that shows problems down the road. If they are not engaged in our executive business reviews, it probably shows that the value we're providing is likely not relevant or helpful for them, and that likely that is going to dwindle, engagement's going to dwindle over time. Are they on track to hitting their goals? If they consistently are missing their goals, that is showing you future prediction of potential churn or frustration at least. So that's the first point, or first step, excuse me. The second step for getting HCAs right, keep the questions simple and clear. No more than 4 or 5, really. I know as human beings, we have a tendency to complicate things. We want to get all of the questions answered for every single scenario and any different stage of the company for any type of customer segment or buyer or user persona. But for now, especially in the beginning, you want to keep it really simple and start to build that muscle for the CSMs. If you're asking the right questions, you don't need many questions. So if you have a low number, then you might be on the right path there. So keep it simple, especially in the beginning. So provide helpful context for ratings. This is step 3. It's a very important step. So if you have your 1 to 5 ratings, you want to be very clear to the CSM what they signify. If they're choosing a 5 versus a 4, a 3 versus a 4, and so on and so forth, you want to make sure that they understand what that means, because the data you collect, you want to normalize across your customers and across your CSMs, and you want to be able to do a lot of fun stuff with that data. So you need to be able to trust the data. So add the context. For instance, how engaged is our buyer in our ABRs? What does that mean? If they are engaged, are they asking a lot of questions? Or is it just that they intended? Is it hard to get anyone to even attend the EBR? If they are engaged, are they co-collaborating or co-creating the deck that you're using to present to the wider team? So there are just a lot of different ways for you to understand how to provide context around these ratings. Step 4. So in this step, this is an important step for rollout. Of course, let's say you're all excited about your HCAs. Of course, your CSMs are going to love it. But what does that mean? Brass tacks, when the rubber hits the road, you want to set them up for success with some helpful guidance, no matter how green or seasoned the CSM might be. So keep it simple. This is a theme through all of this. It's meant to be quick. CSMs really ought to not overthink the assessment. Go with their initial instinct. Follow that instinct, match it up with the context. Be honest. It's okay to have a 1, maybe even encouraged to have a 1, especially if they're in the onboarding phase. Don't be afraid of low numbers. Low numbers give you an opportunity to coach the CSM, and they give the CSM the opportunity to see what's out there and what can be done and where the growth opportunities lie. Keep it up. So continue to complete the HCA at certain intervals. I feel like I'm probably beating a dead horse here, but it is not a one and done, one point in time. It is also not let's say, one goal over time. It's not like your goal is just to become close, expert consultative type, have that type of connection with your customer, and then, oh, great, you're done. It's a checkbox. It's not that. It is that this relationship is going to ebb and flow as you achieve results, as you maybe have some losses, maybe you miss some results, as you fire off new product features, as you miss some of the enhancements they asked for. It is not a get to the goal. It is a goal that is always changing. So don't be afraid of those low numbers. And don't be afraid to keep it up, excuse me. So ask for feedback. Allow CSMs to weigh in on those questions. Revise the questions if you need to. Have fun with it. Act like a marketer. You're a scientist. You're trying to figure out what works best. So be collaborative about the questions and make sure you involve your team. And if one doesn't work, get rid of it. I think the magic of HCA is that you don't have to wait very long to see results. Some teams have seen results in as little as 2 weeks. Most see around the 4-week mark. You can almost immediately start seeing where are the trends and where do we need to do some work, and maybe where does a specific CSM need to do some work, or maybe what is a specific customer segmentation that needs some work in a certain area. Okay. Step 5, the magic of HCAs is, of course, what you do with them. So now you can create workflows based on low, medium, or high scoring brackets. You decide how to segment your brackets. You decide what's low, what's medium, what's high, and if you want to introduce other values within that mix. So what notifications and tasks should be associated with the different scores? What playbooks do you want to implement as a result of HCA activity? What playbooks do you want to implement as a result of no HCA activity? This is the type of fun stuff that you can do when you have or start collecting the data. The last important step that we'll talk about here is to decide how to weigh each question in your overall health score. So if you don't have a health score, you can use HCA as your only health score to start. It is a really great way to start, and it can be very impactful. If you already have a health score in place, you can marry it with your usage metrics or your other metrics, and you want to decide what does the equation look like? Is it going to be 50-50? Is each question going to be weighed equally, and then the assessment overall weighed equally with the rest of your data or score inputs? You decide. I recommend weighting things equally in the very beginning. Again, the goal is just to keep it simple, and you're going to learn certainly as you go. Okay, hopefully those 6 steps were helpful. I really do think it's all you need to get up and running and started, and to create a really great platform, or program that your teams love. Okay, so now you have voice of the customer data. What should you be doing with that data? So this is a great question. I love this question. It's sort of like, okay, now what? We have it, great. How do I actually do something with it? So in this example, we can see the data trends for our example customer Crayon that we talked about earlier. We could view this data for Crayon and Crayon only, or we could view it across all CSMs and across all customers over time. And you can see why tracking this information over time and not just point in time, is so critical to understanding the changes in success or the changes in health, because it's not just the data point that's important. I think we all know it's not just important for us to know that they're healthy or unhealthy. It's important for us to understand, are they more healthy or less healthy than they were last week, last month, last quarter, etc. So when you track this data over time, you can see how it ebbs and flows. You can even use milestones or simple chart annotations in order to create a look back or look forward report that sheds light on those changes. You can even create the workflows that we talked about earlier if HCAs go uncompleted or incompleted, or if a major change in a score happens, you want to trigger a playbook for the CSM. So let's read this data for a second here, looking at the charts. And I can see that the COVID or milestone number 4 did not affect the health of this deal very much. And I can see that our buyer or milestone number 1 joined, and we did not see a large dip in health. This tells me that over the key inflection points of these customers over the last handful of months, or for this customer Crayon, they're in a really good place. If I want to see more of the narrative or the more of the subjective part of the story, then I can go in the top left, you can see the feed. I can go to the feed. If I want to see how this data manifests along other metrics, I dig more into the data. But I have a good place to start, or a good summary of what's happening with this customer. I, of course, can also marry it with my other customer success metrics in order to see how it fits into the greater health score. Okay, so with the HCA, let's talk about the things that we can do. So we can amplify the voice of the CSM. We now have a common language and a story that helps CSMs communicate quickly and efficiently with leadership, with the rest of the team. By the way, outside of the team, that with that collaborative aspect, you can have anyone chiming in on assessments. You can define and track the subjective, an incredibly important missing piece of the puzzle we talked about earlier. We can improve the overall way we look and crunch our health scores. And we can renew and expand customers with confidence, which is really what we're looking at here to create better connections and to better forecast customer health. So, some resources for you today. We have an HCA template that you can make use of. That's linked here, the human customer assessment template. That's the Google spreadsheet I referenced earlier. We have a Humans of Customer Success community. We meet every last Friday of the month for an hour at 12 noon. And we have topics like how to make change positive and powerful for your teams and for your customers. We have community hours where we all just get together and discuss some of the topics that are pertinent and at the top of our minds. We get panels together to talk about how to maintain relationships during times of, a lot of change and unrest. And we talk about secrets of qualitative insights and how we're harnessing those insights. So any and everyone is welcome. If you would find value out of that, please join. And then we have our blog. We share a lot about qualitative and quantitative and social. Feel free as well to reach out to me specifically. If you have any questions, I'd love to tell you more about the work that we're doing here at Quala, or I would just love to meet you. So thank you so much.